CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
All right, folks, we are live 9 a.m. Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. James Azar here for the Practitioner Brief. I hope you're having a magnificent week. How is your RSA virtual experience going? Really curious to kind of get some feedback. This is, we've seen a lot of virtual conferences. A lot of them have been very regional per se, right? But this is like RSA is trying to do it big, international, the whole 9 yards, all virtual. Curious to get feedback on your experience. Let me know all about that. We've got a lot coming up on today's show, including a report highlighting the top 10 threat detections seen across Microsoft Azure AD and Office 365. We've got a POC exploit released for a Wormable Windows. Mozilla starts rolling out site isolation. We'll talk about that. Argentina smacks Facebook with an order to suspend the WhatsApp data sharing. And lawmakers reintroduce a bill that didn't make it in 2019 again after the Colonial pipeline. So we'll get into all of that here on the show in just a few moments. We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So if you're watching us live, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and share our show. If you're listening after the fact on your favorite podcast listening platform, please subscribe, follow, and give us a 5-star rating as well. When you share our content, when you comment, when you talk about it, you help get us more people, and I do appreciate it. But the show would not be possible without the kind support of these awesome companies, KnowBe4, Wistic, and Ativo Networks. So make sure to check them out as well. My friends at Wistic and I are doing another webinar next week on Tuesday, May 25th. You can see the link in the show notes as well if you're watching us on your favorite social media network. We're going to be hosting Nate Jones from Airbnb. He's the cybersecurity program manager, talking about modernizing vendor risk management and the software supply chain. We're going to have a great conversation. Sign up, limited spots available. We're almost at capacity. I think we've got, 20 or 30 seats still available for this webinar. So please make sure to go and sign up for that if you haven't yet. If you see the event on our LinkedIn page and you sign up there, if you don't actually hit the registration link, you won't get access to the webinar. So please keep that in mind as well. James McQuiggan, happy Wednesday to you, James. Happy Wednesday to you too, buddy. Happy Wednesday to you too. And don't miss out on JJ's Learning Lab over this week at RSA. You don't want to miss it. JJ hosts The Other Side of Cyber with me, and she's doing a Learning Lab at RSA, a really good one, by the way. So go check it out. She's been tirelessly working around it. And now for my traditional sip of coffee before we get into today. See, I brought back my glass. You see that beautiful foam right there. It's lovely. Look at the top. Yeah, I do. I've given it a bit of a shape today. So cheers. All right. Got a big story going on. Let's start off with Microsoft Azure and this report coming from cybersecurity firm Vectra. A new report from the firm talks about the highlights the top 10 threats their customers face when using Microsoft Azure AD. The list of the 2021 Q2 Spotlight Report top 10 threat detections for AD and Office 365 is topped by Office 365 risky exchange operations, Azure AD suspicious operations, and Office 365 suspicious download activity. Between January and March of this year, they saw a startling increase in detections centered on attackers trying to manipulate Exchange in order to gain access to specific data or further attack progression. More than 70% of their customers triggered that detection per week, according to their data. If you take a look at the top 10 threat detections for a large company, Office 365 suspicious power automate flow creation ranks right there with Office 365 risky exchange operations. Coming in at a close third was Office 365 suspicious mail forwarding. Coming in, literally tied here for 4 and 5 is the external teams activity and Office 365 suspicious e-discovery exfil. And then going to Office 365 suspicious sharing activity, Azure AD unusual scripting engine usage, Azure AD redundant access creation, and Office 365 DLL hijacking activity, and Office 365 suspicious download activity, all right there. So last week on Tech Corner, I had Carolyn Crandall. She's the chief security advocate over at Ativo Networks. And we talked about AD. That's literally what we spent an hour talking about, and securing AD. You want to go and check out that episode. She really lays out best practices, some of the best ways to address a lot of these vulnerabilities, really of how to tighten up your Active Directory environment. Please go check it out. You don't want to miss that episode. It's more relevant with this report than ever before. Our friends over at Ativo really pulled through on this one to really help us out. So go check out my interview with Carolyn. You can find it right here on the CyberHub podcast, audio podcast. It's the latest Tech Corner, or you can catch it on our YouTube channel as well as all of our social media pages. Go catch that episode as well. We'll move to another story today. POC exploit released for Wormable Windows vulnerability. Researchers have released a proof of concept exploit for a recently patched Windows vulnerability that could allow remote code execution, and which has been described by Microsoft as Wormable. The flaw, which is CVE 2021-31166 and rated critical severity, was discovered internally by Microsoft, and it was patched by the tech giant in the May 21 Patch Tuesday update. The vulnerability affects the HTTP protocol stack, and exploitation does not require authentication or user interaction. In most situations, as unauthenticated attackers could send a specially crafted packet to a targeted server, utilizing the HTTP protocol stack to process packets, according to Microsoft. The vulnerability only impacts recent versions of Windows 10 and Windows servers, which means it can be used against certain systems. However, in its advisory, Microsoft assigns it an exploitation more likely rating. So give this, this has been patched, but the exploit is already available. And if you haven't patched it, now you know that it's out in the wild and they're coming for you. So go get that done. We'll get to a comment here by Peter. Good morning, Peter. Super important on Microsoft Active Directory. It's critical, folks, at this time. The Active Directory story that I led off with today should be a wake-up call for 75 to 80% of the people who listen and watch this show. So that's a lot of you. That's people in the thousands. Go get this thing patched. Go listen to Carolyn. Engage your partners in security and find ways to start addressing these vulnerabilities and challenges that exist within our environments. Mozilla starts rolling out site isolation to all Firefox channel. So site isolation is a new security feature to all Firefox channels, protecting users from attacks launched via malicious websites. How it works is the new site isolation security architecture acts as an additional security boundary between sites, and it works by completely separating users' web content, loading all sites in separate processes. Essentially, what it does is now when you put something on any browser and you load a site, it's essentially integrated into all parts of the process. It's not isolated. Here, every site would have an isolated process, so they can't cross-script. They can't access any data from other, tabs or sites that you have open on your browser. If this feature is enabled, Firefox can protect users from attackers exploiting Meltdown and Spectre vulnerabilities that we spoke about several weeks ago here on the show that would allow them to harvest sensitive data by reading memory content. My question is, when is this going to become a industry-wide browser thing? Because it's a really good feature. It should be done more. And so hopefully it'll get more of that. But there are some advantages, and it also has performance benefits, like using more processors to load websites allows us to spread the work across many CPU cores and use the underlying hardware more efficiently rather than a single, if you guys ever hear your fan just rolling on your computer and whatnot when you're trying to load up. To enable site isolation on Firefox nightly, you go to About Preferences and Experimental, check the Fission site isolation checkbox to enable and restart it. You do the same on Firefox Beta or Release. Go to About and Config, go to Fission Auto Start, preference it to True, and restart Firefox, and you'll have that there as well. We move on to Argentina orders Facebook to suspend the WhatsApp data sharing. Argentina has ordered Facebook to suspend its data use policy, allowing it to collect information from users of its WhatsApp messaging app, the government announced on Monday. The suspension will last at least 6 months and aims to prevent abuse of a dominant position, according to Argentina. This is a great move by Argentina, by the way. As you guys know, I'm outspoken in the fact that this should not be the case. So you should definitely go check this out. Well done by Argentina. Hopefully more governments follow suit. I know Germany did something similar. I know there's talks all over Europe of doing something extremely similar to that. We could be seeing this blow up in the face of Facebook simply because WhatsApp is really used a lot internationally by a lot of organizations. And there's great concern with some of this data being mined for advertisers. Great concern. And finally, 2019, when I started this podcast, this month, I celebrate 3 years next week. We talked a little bit about the Colonial pipeline, about pipeline security and legislation. There was a bill, the Pipeline Security Act, which was brought to the floor, failed, didn't get through. People didn't think it was important, but what does it take to remind our elected officials of something? I don't know, a national security sized disaster like the Colonial ransomware attack, right? So the Pipeline Security Act, which didn't receive a vote, is now back on the floor. It's in committee right now with the House Committee on Homeland Security with a markup session. They want to pass this off to TSA and CISA, as well as the Department of Transportation. Very, very interesting here. This bill is now on the floor. So it looks like all it takes is, $3 a gallon of fuel or $4 or $5, depending on where you live in the country. And our elected officials go, maybe we should do something about it rather than being proactive. We need to change that, definitely. That's it for our practitioner brief today. A lot of RSA content coming today. If you missed it yesterday, I had on Nadir Israel, the founder and CTO over at Armis. We talked about industrial control systems. You can go check out those episodes. All of our RSA content, folks, is 15 to 20 minutes long. It's not very long. It's bite-sized content. It's absolutely great. We did a live yesterday also with Art Gilliland, the CEO over at Thycotic and Centrify, talking about the merger, talking about identity and identity across the cloud. We also highlighted Azure AD in identity, so you want to go check that out. That's available on our YouTube page and our LinkedIn page. That was a live session. It's not in audio, so if you're listening on audio, you're going to have to go to our YouTube channel, subscribe there to get it, or go to our LinkedIn page, follow the CyberHub podcast, CISO Talk podcast page, and you can see it all there as well. We'll be dropping a CISO Talk today on audio only, not on video because of all the RSA content. So you can go check that out as well. It's the Cyber FinTech panel with Sam Phillips, Paul Farley, Ken Foster, and Gautam Vyas, really having a conversation around FinTech and cyber, a great conversation from a panel from an event I did on April 27th. So you can go and check that out as well. That'll be available on the CISO Talk panel. On the CISO Talk channel, go there and subscribe. And so it's going to be a very, very interesting panel for you guys to tune into, especially if you're in FinTech. Roger says, I'm anticipating a good program on infrastructure, cyber vulnerabilities for the engineering society. Me too, Roger. Me too. Very excited about that event, and I'll bring you more on that later. Folks, that's it for us here today. I'll be back with a lot more tomorrow to wrap up this week. But RSA content later today. We've got a slammed week this week with RSA, so make sure to tune in. Go to subscribe to our YouTube page, and most importantly, go check out the podcast I did with Carolyn on Azure AD. You don't want to miss it. It's definitely going to be something you want to pay attention to. That's it for us here, folks. Stay cyber safe. Cheers. Have a great day.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.